No means no. If you say no to this, that means the capital improvements that would be going to these other schools would not happen. We had our maintenance person, Pascal, come in. He informed us at that time that our doors were not up to code to keep our kids safe in a lock-in or lockdown situation. We had to scramble through the budget line by line to find a way to pay for doorknobs. And we'll do it again, and there'll be sacrifices. I hope it's not staff. It'll be painful, and we'll survive, but it's a cumulative effect. It'll start to wear on this community. It won't be top 10 anymore. So I hope not, but we'll find a way to do it if we have to.
Thank you, Kim. Joey, same question.
In the event that the bond and mill levy for funding it were to fail, I would suggest that the board revisit priority projects and then look at how we can fund those in different means. A few years ago, the district was able to utilize resources and find ways of saving money, which included replacing a boiler that was older than I am. At that time, we thought it was a tremendous expense, but over the last 4 years has saved us over $500,000 in terms of purchase of gas fuel for that boiler at the high school alone. One of our most expensive buildings is the 7th Street building in terms of utility costs, and yet has the lowest amount of impact to students. We need to start looking at how these buildings, which were underfunded during the Great Recession, are overall impacting the district, and then making an assessment on what of those buildings we can look to utilize in different ways.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. Tony, your turn.
If the bond fails, we as a school board should conduct a deep analysis of why it failed and what lessons can be learned in the future. It will be imperative to include community and business representatives in the discussion. The school board as community representatives could lead a clear strategic planning process for improving our schools and supporting students and teachers. The strategic plan would need to include finding ways to foster more community buy-in and build upon the past. Work in the findings from 10+2 committee that successfully got a high school renovated in the mid-90s, and the community for education that has spent almost 2 years working with the community on various issues, including accountability, communications, policies, facilities. We can build upon the work that has already been done by these community committees and school district advisory groups from 2018-2019.
Thank you. Lara.
Well, as a teacher in the middle school, I'm acutely aware of the facilities needs in our school district. I do want to say I did personally redecorate a closet to create a teacher's lounge. So that was fun, and it actually turned out really great. But we eat in our own classrooms. We often have students in our classrooms because the lunchroom, the cafetorium is outrageously loud and crowded. So if the school bond fails, we definitely will need to go back to the drawing board. We'll need to gather up the stakeholders again, and we'll have to determine why our community is so resistant to funding safe and appropriate schools, facilities for our students. We are a town that is growing. I don't know how we could imagine. Just 1 minute.
It's time.
It's time.
That was super confusing, Catherine. Callie.
If the bond were to fail, we need to immediately put students first and think creatively about how we use what we have now to make sure we're setting them up for success. We have parents and we have community leaders and business leaders come together, especially those folks who might not be touched by the schools right now, and get their opinion, their feedback. We need to dive into the data and decide what our community does support, so we can prioritize those projects and make sure we're doing right by our kids. Whatever we do next needs to have more than 51% of voter support. And I think we can do that. But if it were to fail, then it's back to the drawing board, where we as a community come together, We gather a diverse stakeholder group and we say, what can we do to make sure the next bond does pass?
Thank you. Okay, next question. We will start with Joey. Our district has a steadily increasing number of English as second language learners. Do you believe the district is doing enough to support these students?
The demographic of ELL students or English language learner students is growing, and it's going to continue to grow. I think as a district, we need to continue to look at how we can have dual immersion with those students. But I think it's important too to recognize that just alone in our kindergarten class this year, we have 23 different languages represented. 23. That's a huge number. And I think part of it too that we need to recognize is how do you reach out to 23 different languages in parent announcements? We can continue to grow the program, but we also need to recognize how we can utilize the strengths of those students and the material that they've already brought to the district to enrich our classrooms and to also provide a better education for them.
Tony.
Will you repeat the question, please?
Yes, we have, the district has a steadily increasing number of English as second language learners. Do you believe the district is doing enough to support those students?
Well, obviously, I have to get in and learn more about it. I'm not intimately in the schools every day or on the board to know any better. However, I do deal with hundreds of kids every Monday and Wednesday through Steamboat Youth Athletics. And their English as a second learners, they seem to be functioning very well in our community, which is great. So obviously, there is some learning going on, which is outstanding. But let's be honest, we can always get better at everything we do, no matter what. Therefore, do I think, I can't answer that, I'm not there. I'll have to go in, listen, and learn. But no matter what, we can improve all aspects of everything we do in the district.
Thank you. Laura.
As far as our English language learners, we are making some pretty good strides in supporting their needs. We have a newcomer program at the high school that's been pretty successful. It's new, so usually it takes 3 to 5 years to kind of see how a productive and effective a program like that is. However, we do have a significant achievement gap for our English as a second language learners. So we do need to do more. The best thing to do is actually to look at the data, to look at initiatives that actually work and spend the money for things that actually work. One thing that is important is really getting back into reading. Reading is the #1 way to close the achievement gap. And so when we're exposing our ELL learners to more language and language enriched environments, then we are going to close the achievement gap.
Thank you. Kelly.
Laura is spot on. We are doing a lot of wonderful things as a district, such as that newcomers program, as well as the ACE Club, that's at Soda Creek, and a few other organizations I've had the pleasure participating or volunteering with or hearing from. It's pretty inspiring to see those students coming to this country, having English as a second language and still devoting themselves every day to learning. However, we as a district continually are not meeting the state standards for the majority of that population. I've looked at our historic data, and we're often approaching or does not meet for that specific subgroup, and so I know that there is more we can do. Specifically, some of those items are to provide more support for those programs I mentioned, but also to look at some of the successful English language learning programs around the country and to implement their best practices here in Steamboat Springs.
Thank you. Kim.
Yeah, I would agree with Laura. I think it has improved a lot. I know that we have some dedicated ELL school instructors in the elementaries now that we didn't have before, which is huge. I know that Integrated Community is an amazing nonprofit in our community that works with the schools and community members at large. And I invite anyone that doesn't know about that population to spend some time at Integrated Community. You'll learn so much. Sheila Henderson used to be the director there, and she like schooled me. It might be pie in the sky, but I would love to see bilingual schools. I think that would really put us forward, put our students forward. 90% of kids that graduate bilingual have an advantage over the kids that do not, a 92% advantage over kids that do not graduate bilingual. So our kids, by not graduating bilingual, are at a disadvantage with the world population and the world community. We're in a state now where our kids are global citizens. And
Great. Okay, now we are on, I believe, to our last question. Tony, we'll start with you. What do you believe are the 3 biggest challenges facing the Steamboat Springs School District?
Well, first of all, coming together and not being a fractured district and a fractured school district, which I think some of these bond issues are creating, this division within our community and in our school. We need to hold everyone in our district accountable. We need everyone from the very top to our students need to be held accountable. We ask our kids to be accountable. We need our administration to be accountable. Also, I think people need to listen. We don't listen. There's a natural assumption all the time, and we can no longer afford to rubber stamp this administration. We need to listen to our constituents. We need to listen to the people in the community. Our community is a very educated community, very bright people, and some of those are the challenges there. Other than that, I think we have an amazing school district. Our teachers are starting with amazing talent.
Thank you. Laura?
Our school district's doing really great things for kids, but I don't believe it is about accountability. I think we have tremendous accountability. I think what we need is a school board that will set a clear vision for our schools throughout every single school, and that all of our school meetings, our in-service, our workshops are supporting that vision. We do need to close the achievement gap, and we do need to pay attention to our special populations. We're doing a really great job with the 80% in the middle, but we need to really give some attention to our English language learners, low-income students, special ed, and even our GT population. It's not just about closing the achievement gap, but also working on growth for all of our schools, our students, making sure that their data-based and evidence-based practice is being used by all teachers.
Thank you. Kelly?
There's a clear reason I've chosen to align with Krista Brickman and Laura Craig in running for school board, and it's because of that shared vision. It's what Laura just mentioned, that the achievement gap should be our #1 priority as a school district. We are doing so well, consistently in that top 10, and yet we don't want to pat ourselves on the back because we have those special subgroups, those students with disabilities, the English language learners, and those from a disadvantaged socioeconomic background who are consistently, as a group in those state standards, struggling. I'd like to see continued focus on those populations. I'd also like to see support for retaining and recruiting high-quality staff. Right now, when we have vacant positions, sometimes those starting salaries are not appealing to the best and the brightest. We need to raise those. Additionally, I'd like to see increased focus on social and emotional health, which I had the pleasure of speaking about earlier, as well as better communication with community members. One of those things I'd love to do, if elected, would be to increase a public discussion around school district processes. At the workshops currently, there's no time for public comment, and I'd like to see more engagement from the school board with the public.
Thank you. Kim?
Okay, so 3 things. Clearly, I believe the capital improvement projects are an issue. Our teachers should not be using a closet for their lounge, their teacher's lounge. That's just kind of not right. So that's just one example of many. And that's because the teacher's lounge became a classroom. I think teacher retention and livable wage is really important. I know for a fact we lost at least 2 amazing high school teachers that were wonderful with my kids at the high school, that were passionate about teaching, but they got offered a better paying job in town, so they left. And that's a bummer. It's inefficient and expensive to retrain, rehire, start all over again. And it's hard, like Kelly said, to even get them to come over with these low wages in front of them. And number 3, and this is probably the hardest in the 11 years I've been in this district, is to get community buy-in for the schools in this community. 71% of people don't have kids at the school, and they've never had kids in our district and won't have kids in our district. So we've got to get them to buy into how important schools are in this community. I believe it is the bedrock for any community.
Thank you. Joey?
For me, I think there's 3 fundamentals that the school district and Board of Education need to continue to focus on. Well, the Steamboat Springs School District has been ranked in the top 10 school districts out of a total of 179 districts statewide. That doesn't necessarily mean that Colorado is the benchmark of perfection for what we should be striving for. Let's continue to look at all 50 states. Let's continue to look at the states back east that have, yes, higher funding, but also higher performance. Let's continue to narrow the gaps with our students that are on ELL, IEP, 504 plans. Additionally, facilities. We know that classrooms under staircases don't work. Our students aren't Harry Potter. It doesn't work. That impacts our most vulnerable populations. And finally, one of the things that we need to understand is we are the biggest little district in the state of Colorado. Quite literally, at over 2,600 students, we are a district that has growing pains and needs to recognize that we have to start making some adjustments, and that's an attitude adjustment. So.
Thank you. Now we'll do the 1-minute closings, and we're going to start with Tony and come this way. So Tony, your turn.
Yes, I will be you guys hear me, sir? I will be an independent voice of parents and teachers. I will not march in lockstep with anyone while collaborating with other entities to gain success. I will encourage input from my constituents, act as their representative, mindful of that input. I will seek accountability as to spending of budgets and funds. I will seek allocations of greater portion of school budget to those that have hands-on interactions with our student and not to administration. I will make certain that our students have tools necessary to support their future expectations. I will seek excellence in all aspects of our students' education and performance. Tony Rosso, an independent voice for parents, teachers, and community.
Thank you. Joey.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. My name is Joey Andrew. On the ballot, it's Joseph Andrew. For the 4-year term, you have the option to circle 3 names. I hope I'm one of those. I think it's important to note that this district is doing more with less. Every year, $2 million is shortchanged to the Steamboat Springs School District through the budget stabilization factor, or the BS factor. We are, I didn't name it, we are sharpening our pencils. We are doing that. There is more that we can do. And I want to be the voice that will meet with you in the grocery store, at the produce aisle, or wherever you find me, to continue to represent your thoughts and ideas and considerations and bring them to the Board of Education. I think it's important to note too, this district's a lot more than just the board. It's the community, it's our staff, it's you, the 71% of eligible voters and property tax owners that don't have kids in our district. Thank you so much.
Kim.
Thanks again, everyone. I really hope to continue my hard work for this community and school district. I love learning and I love research, and it has been a wonderful surprise for me that our school board, CASB and CAA in Denver have offered more training as we've been running. Some of us took advantage of that. I haven't missed one, so we can hit the ground running right when we get in there. I hope it's okay if I quote an esteemed former board member and an educator, Margaret Huron. She said to keep your eyes on the prize, our kids. I hope to do that. I promise to continue learning, listening, and working hard for you if you elect me. Thanks, Kim.
Kelly?
The research tells us what makes schools highly effective. It's high quality instruction, it's visionary school leadership, it's high expectations for students, effective use of data, open dialogue and trust between the parents and the schools, as well as a clear vision with buy-in from the community. I'm a committed volunteer for our schools. I have the background and experience in education policy and an understanding of what the research says, as well as the willingness to collaborate and the time and energy to commit to this volunteer role. I want to be a part of a board that builds off of the district's current performance and sets a path towards sustained student achievement, growth, and preparedness academically, socially, and behaviorally. We have historically been ranked high in this state, but our students need to be prepared to compete in a global economy. If elected, I will make data-driven decisions with the goal of improving student success for every Steamboat Springs School District student. My name is Kelly Latterman, and I hope I will have your vote for the Steamboat Springs Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, want to close us out? for this
I want
portion?
to thank you in advance for considering me for a 4-year seat on the school board. I want to thank the pilot for hosting this forum. As a mom and an educator in this district, I am uniquely qualified to listen to community concerns and make sound decisions that will have an impact on the success of our students and staff in all of our schools and across all grade levels. I know firsthand our schools are good, but I want to work for the next 4 years to make our schools excellent. I believe this can be accomplished if we align our staff and administration district-wide by adopting a strong and clear vision, if we use evidence-based practices in all classrooms, and if we provide teachers the time and the resources to implement that evidence-based practice. I believe all of our students deserve to have the opportunity to reach their potential and to meet the needs of the 21st century beyond Steamboat Springs. Please vote for me. I'm Laura Craig. I have the passion, knowledge, and time to dedicate to this district, and will strive to create excellence for all students in our schools.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to take a 10-minute intermission. The second portion of this is going to be shorter. I promise you will be out of here before 8 o'clock. So if everyone wants to grab a drink, but we're going to start promptly at 7:10. Thank you. Sir.
This is great. This is great.
But it was just close. You're cheering squad, that was so cute. Yes, please pass.
Oh,
Can I get you a water?
Oh, no. We'll be heading out. We can't vote for city.
Oh, that's a bummer. But it's always, everyone's always gonna give us.
Hey there, how you doing?
It's inspiring to see.
Yeah, you did a great job.
I appreciate that. Well, except when I take my water in my hand, we'll do this, I'll like, don't take the water. I am very proud of you. Jesus, so much. I didn't grow up, I was really excited. So simple. You spoke fast, but yeah, we could hear you. So speaking fast was slow for me. No, it's good. I was like, I tried it very, I was in debate, but you were very clear.
There are
Very
people
clear.
who run fast but don't have good addiction.
No, you
It's not a
do.
combination.
Yeah.
Which is
Plus the
difficult.
content. Thank you. I just worry that because there's such a small amount of time, I didn't want to say the same things over, but there's such a strong theme among all the questions that there's going to be overlap. So thank you. Yeah, again, I was just very happy that I did not get sick. And how's Noah? He's 6 foot tall, literally, not kind of. He is 6 foot tall and 13. Is he seeing any cool birds these days? So they just built ospreys. They're putting posts up.
Another osprey next door.
I'm trying to think of where it is. They are putting posts up. I want to say kind of towards Walden. So Tracy and I contacted him and Greg and said, okay, they're going to put a post up. Can you guys build some next? So this weekend they built the box and then they went and got willows yesterday. We still owe a thank you, by the way, but this has taken over my focus and time. So,
We were
oh my gosh.
we were so thrilled to have the guys.
This is so powerful that you supported them in that. That you supported them in that. And I feel like
I have something for the boys. Al Reiner, the local professional photographers, gave me a flash drive with all kinds of data. No, not photos. Photography advice. And I need to get it to know that I need to. I was sitting by my computer and I went down to Walmart to try and buy another flash drive so I could copy it. But they're out of flash drives. So I'll just get it to them and they can, one of them can put it on his computer and copy it on, the other can have the flash drive.
oh, thank you so much. So you'll like this. Gray was hunting a couple of weekends ago. It was youth hunting day or something like that. So Noah doesn't have his hunting license. He just finished it last night. So he just took pictures. So he took pictures of them hunting. He took pictures of the birds. He took pictures of all the things going on around them. And, oh, but I just really appreciate you guys taking them out. I think you made them feel so.
We tried to introduce them to all the
You
burning
did.
luminaries.
But you legitimize something that they're passionate about that they don't get a lot of support for amongst that like 13-year-old population.
I'm gonna have you write my speeches for me whenever I need them.
I feel like you did okay. I used to do that for people. Truly. I love that. And you do a great job.
Good job.
I mean, so on it, so great.
Joey? David Moulton. Okay, you wouldn't know. I'm sorry. I'm really bad with names, David. I'm not sure you ever heard it.
So, can I tell you why I love these two? My son is an avid birder. Has been for years. He and his friend, that's what they do. They take pictures of birds. Yes, absolutely. They're budding ornithologists. They took them out to streets. They introduced them to a wealth of people within the birding community. It was amazing.
That's really cool.
So, yes.
We were thrilled to have young kids. So most of the bird nerds around here have gray hair. It was just so nice.
I just sent the saddest article to them today. I just had
3 billion birds lost.
but it's not the same one from NPR a couple weeks ago. It's a new one. And I was like, no more.
Who are these people?
Okay.
They are bird nerds.
This is Julie Turney. She is our campaign manager.
Oh, super.
So I don't want to mess up your last name. I can never.
Moulton.
Moulton. Oh, I know some. Yes. Okay, so Dave.
David.
And then Teresa. I wanted to say Teresa, and I'm like, no, Teresa. So Dave and Teresa Moulton. So they took Noah and Gray during the Green Festival and spent the day with them, introduced introduce them to all of these different people, introduce them to,
I took them to the Round Mountain Ranch with Ted Floyd.
And their Ted son, right? Carpenter Ridge. I always want to say Humble Ridge. I don't know, it's the other one. Locked in my mind. Anyway, there was such a lot of my house, and they just mind
Great dad commented that for those kids to go out with Ted Floyd was like getting tickets to a rock concert.
or meeting a celebrity.
Because
I mean,
Ted
which
Floyd
he is, but like
is
a movie.
one of the top birders in the country.
I mean, I'm gonna go say hello to my parents' boss. I just saw that. Let's stay in touch. Let's make sure that we don't lose
I'll send an email out to the kids to tell them that I have the flash drive and arrange to hand it over.
I haven't been doing any birding because we had a bad hip quick
Take
walk.
care.
So
Thanks for
this weekend I
doing all
a
this
little
stuff.
better. So we went over to Fish Creek Falls and we saw a really cool thing, but not a bird. What was it? It's a pika at Fish Creek Falls. Usually they're way up like on the circle,
A little mammal about this big.
Like,
Yeah,
not a
rock
urban, but like a.
So it's a
Yeah,
rock
it's a
rabbit.
little,
They
it's a
call
little
them.
ball of fluff. So if the boys want to see something cool,
That would be really
Yeah.
It's
good.
really hard to find.
Oh my gosh.
It's literally smaller than my fist. With little round ears and no tail.
Well, thank you. I was one of the.
we can send them a note about where we'll-
But let's make sure we keep this going. I think it's so very nice. Very, very, very nice for you guys.
Well, Christmas bird count will be coming up. We'll be looking for them.
He wants to go, I don't remember where it is, but there's like the big day. I want to say it's in Texas. It's like
Oh,
the big
October
day.
19th, it's the global big day for eBird.
Yeah, so we were like, no, we're not traveling right now. He's like, but I just want to go. So does my daughter. She wants birds. I'm like, that's like having another kid. And I found someone to take
daughter
her
in
quail.
birding?
Quail. She wants to have quail. I found someone to take the quail. Because I asked them, great, do you love them enough to shuffle and take care of them outside in the school in the wintertime? And then they were like, no, maybe not. Like, hey, because I'm not doing it. I already have the
Kids want to
chicken.
get involved in birding.
Okay.
We
Yes.
get hold of Noah and Greg, and we love getting more kids involved in birding.
She's got the sandhill crane down.
Step outside and see
It's so nice to see
what's
you
out
guys.
there.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you.
42 in the board.
It's so good to see you. I hope your hip is. I'm looking at it. Nice job. Thank you. You did great. I need to run, but nice job. You're amazing. Hi, your baby. Awesome. Thank you. They're all you do. Yeah. You're great. No, you're awesome. No, you're awesome. You see me going like this. I bet. I know you were fine.
Oh, yeah, it was, thank you. It's the west. How do you say why you know I'm in stress? And they were but like comparatively, like.
I was so glad we were hanging on the road. First thing you did was take a deep breath.
That's very conservative. So much. That breaks me. I just wanted to be rich. We're not married.
Still with a hard seat.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, ladies. Nice job up there. Yeah, awesome.
My son graduated in 2016. He's at University of California, San Diego, and my daughter is still staying there.
You need to be up on stage. Because you go on, you're like, what, we're gonna get you anti-air? You belong on stage. All right.
Okay, everybody, I want to be, it's getting late and I know it's been a long night, but an important one. So if the sooner you sit down, the sooner we can go home. Okay, so we're going to begin this half of the forum. We're going to first focus on the two statewide issues, and then we will move to the city council, the one contested race for the at-large position for city council, and then we'll end with the fire mill levy. So we're going to begin with Proposition CC, and just to remind you what that is, Proposition CC would allow the state government to keep all of the money it collects from existing sources every year over the existing revenue limit and spend the money for public schools, higher education, and transportation projects rather than refund it to taxpayers. Tonight, Representative Dylan Roberts is with us. Thank you for coming here. And he will be, this is a proposition that was referred by the legislature, so Dylan will be speaking on behalf of Proposition CC. Michael Fields, who is the executive director of Colorado Rising, was supposed to be here to offer the opponent's view to this. He could not be here because of the weather. What I would suggest is they have a website, coloradorisingaction.org. And so on there are videos and a lot of information about what he would have shared with you tonight. I think with that, we will just go ahead and we're going to let Dylan do a 2-minute opening and then we'll go into 3 questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks to the SEMO pilot for hosting this, and thanks to everybody for being here. And shout out to all the candidates who are running this year. I know what that's like, and it's nice to be here speaking about a ballot initiative rather than myself. But I'm really excited to be here to be speaking on behalf and in favor of Proposition CC. Because one of the things I heard the most when I was campaigning for the State House from all of you at your door at community meetings was, why don't we spend more and invest more in our education and in our transportation system? And you know that we've had ballot initiatives year after year to fund transportation, to fund education, and those were all in the forms of tax increases. And then because we have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, the voters get to say whether they want those to pass or not. And none of those have passed in recent years. But Proposition CC is a way to invest more in education and in transportation without raising taxes. So right now, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which was passed in 1992, has a revenue cap formula that is imposed based off of population and inflation. So population growth and inflation And that is an arbitrary cap that gets reset every year after the data comes in on those two numbers. And anything above the cap that gets brought in through existing tax mechanisms, sales tax, property taxes, et cetera, has to be refunded to the taxpayers. Over the last 27 years, there's been 9 years in which a refund has been sent back out. Right now, if we have a refund this year, it's about $37 per person in the state of Colorado, one-time refund. Proposition CC proposes, just like all 49 other states in the United States that take in revenue above their cap, that the state gets to keep that and invest it in critical needs in our state. So if Proposition CC passes, the state will be allowed to keep any revenue that comes in over the cap and spend it on 3 major categories: K through 12 education, higher education, and transportation. With such a strong economy, I think this is the right direction for Colorado to go, because we need to use our good economic times and invest it back in our state. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the first question is, what assurances do taxpayers have that the legislature will spend the funds from Proposition CC on the 3 areas referenced in the ballot language?
So that's a great question. So we actually passed 2 bills to create this ballot initiative. One was the bill to put it on the ballot, and then there was a companion bill that says if this measure passes, this money must be spent on these 3 things. That bill was passed into law and was signed by the governor. So we literally passed legislation that ensures that this money will be invested in those 3 categories: K through 12, higher education, and transportation. So there is statutory language in place ready to go if this ballot initiative passes that ensures that the money will be spent on those 3 things and those 3 things alone.
Okay, why do we need to pass Proposition CC? Doesn't the state's budget have enough funds?
So Proposition CC is critical to pass in the state of Colorado because, as many of you know, we've been talking about all night, I don't think we spend enough on our schools and on our teachers and on our roads, certainly. We in Colorado have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and we have other budget constrictions like Gallagher and Amendment 23 that constrict our budget. And so we don't spend enough on transportation and education. This is a way to invest more in those critical things, if you believe that that's something that the state should do, and I certainly do, without raising taxes. So this is a way to do those things without raising taxes. This is funding that is already collected by the state. And I think it's important that in such a strong economic state that we put that money back into our kids, into our higher education institutions, and certainly into our roads that we travel on every day.
Okay, and so you mentioned this, but opponents of Proposition CC are classifying this as a tax increase, even though it is not imposing a new tax, but it would allow the government to keep monies that would normally be refunded to taxpayers through Tabor. How do you address that opposition?
Well, I mean, the basic definition of a tax increase would be raising a tax revenue or imposing a new tax. That's not what this does. So this money is already being sent to the state by taxpayers. It's not raising anybody's tax rates. It's not imposing any new tax. So it simply goes against the very definition of what a tax increase is to call Proposition CC a tax increase. It's already money that the state's bringing in. So while it is normally money that would be refunded, like I said, over the last 27 years since Tabor's been imposed, there's only been refunds 9 times. They're usually around $30 to $35 per person, one-time refund. I think collectively as a state, if we pool that money together, we can invest it in our kids, in our future, and in our transportation system.
Thank you. So now we're just going to go to closing. That was quick. And Geneva Taylor is going to read a statement to represent the opposition to Proposition CC as her closing.
Thank you. I didn't know that Mr. Fields was not going to be here until I came tonight, but it just so happened that I had a letter from Bob Beaupre, and I had printed it out and had it with me, so I'd like to read that to you. This is about CC. Your 2019 election ballot is about to arrive in your mailbox. I want to call your attention to Proposition CC and ask you to help me defeat this blatant attempt to overturn Colorado's Constitution and impose a massive tax increase on each one of us. As you understand, Tabor mandates that the tax revenue collected by the state in any fiscal year in excess of the limits imposed by law must be returned to the taxpayers. But Proposition CC would reverse the law and allow state to keep the entire surplus forever. That's right, forever. This is not temporary. This is no emergency situation, no unforeseen disaster, and we sure haven't been in dire economic straits in Colorado. In fact, because of our robust economy and growing population, the state budget has mushroomed to over $30 billion annually. The truth is, they will never think they have enough of your money. And the only way to prevent a runaway train of spending is to keep Tabor intact. Since this law was enacted in 1992, over $3 billion have been returned to the Colorado taxpayers. By keeping a lid on out-of-control government spending, experts credit Tabor as a big reason for Colorado having one of the strongest economies in the state. Now, you know, my background is banking, and I've never believed in a blank check. The only blank check I've ever accepted was the one that my husband gave me when he asked me for my first date. So, no blank checks, please.
Thank you, Janina. Dylan, you want to close?
Thank you, and thanks for having me. A few things I'd like to note about Proposition CC when you're considering it on your ballot this year. Like I said, this was a measure that was referred by the legislature, meaning it passed both chambers of the legislature. This was bipartisan. And not only did it receive Republican votes, it was co-prime sponsored by a Republican state senator in the state Senate. This proposition honors the taxpayer Bill of Rights by asking the voters if they want the state to do this with their money. That is exactly the intent of Tabor. So we all get to decide whether you want to do this or not. And if we want to change it back in years in the future, the taxpayers can decide to do that as well. This will mean a lot for our state. It is certainly not a budgetary fix to all of our problems, but it could mean a huge, significant positive factor for our state's education and infrastructure. On the transportation level, 40% of the money will go to local infrastructure where local authorities get to decide how it's spent. For higher education, it can go to lowering tuition for our state college students. And for K-12, it can go to improving our classrooms and giving our teachers the bonuses and incentives that they deserve. So I would please ask that you vote yes on Proposition CC.
Thank you very much. Now, Janina, we need to kind of keep it with how we have it. Yeah, thank you. I want to be consistent. Thanks. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Doug Conger, I invite Doug up to talk about Proposition DD. And just to remind you what DD is, it would legalize sports betting in the state of Colorado, and it would authorize a state tax on casinos' net sports betting proceeds, with 90% of revenue collected to be used to create a dedicated source of the funding for the Colorado Water Plan. Doug is going to be talking in favor of Proposition DD, and we were unable to identify any opposition. It's not just me trying, it's the Republicans, it's the Democrats, and we could not find someone to speak against it. So Doug, would you begin by offering a 2-minute opening statement?
So thank you very much. Doug Conger, Round County Commissioner. I also sit on the Colorado River District Board, as well as the Yampa River Roundtable and the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. So I have gills maybe a little bit, and but I am very passionate about water, and so Proposition DD is a new thing, and if you guys are following this, I'm sure you all are. This was a situation that has come up when the Supreme Court said that states should be able to monitor gambling and sports betting and the rest. And so through the legislature that Dylan was part of, and a bipartisan approach came through and proposed that we have this Proposition DD. And so that we weren't having any more under the carpet type of gambling and sports betting, and sending all of our money, this sports betting money, to Las Vegas and the rest. And so this proposition came forward, and so that's why during the legislation I was a little confused of why water got picked on this thing. And so, you know, and I'm not a fan of sin taxes, and I'm not a fan of this kind of stuff. But I think the legislature did a good job of approaching and determining how some of those things were going to be taken care of and the rest. So I think I'll just close at that for now in the open statement. Unless you want me to talk, again, I'll be real quick here. I am going to vote for this thing, but I have some concerns with it, and so I think you guys, I will talk a little bit out of both cheeks here a little bit. So
Okay, that's great. We wouldn't expect anything less.
lay it on the line, talk off the sleeve.
Okay, so first question is gambling can lead to addiction, which is a behavioral health issue. Why is only 1.35% of the funds raised by Proposition DD designated for the Office of Behavioral Health to deal with this issue?
So I wouldn't be able to answer that question other than the fact I'm glad that the legislature actually addressed the concept. I was in my earlier life, I was in the horse racing business and the rest. Gambling is an addiction. And so, I mean, even the lottery is an addiction to some people. So, you know, I'm not in favor of that, especially because that's a regressive situation. But at the same point in time, it's happened United States wide. Colorado ought to benefit out of that. We ought to be able to get our part. I'm glad that the legislature put some money out into the situation to try to deal with the gambling addiction problem. So.
Thank you. The Colorado Water Plan includes options for dams, which have potential unintended consequences for the environment in some communities. Will Proposition DD funds be used to build new dams?
So absolutely, yes, it could be. I personally think it's very little to slim chance that that's where it's going to head. And my personal, with the gills that I have and the rest, I will guarantee you that, you know, the money for this thing is headed toward the environmental and recreation water. And I'll guarantee you it's headed toward environmental and recreation water. When we start talking about building dams and the rest, that's going to be users, that's going to be major users. Denver Water, you know, the Front Range Water Council, and those people that are going to be coming in, and they're going to get that out of their users. They're not going to be asking for this money. I'll remind you that unlike a lot of things, this money is being distributed to the CWCB, which is a representative board of all of the river basins. It's not it's not necessarily representative of population. So we actually might have a higher ability to get more money into our needs. I'll leave it there.
What impact would Proposition DD have locally on Steamboat Springs and Route County, in your opinion?
So I think, you know, Steamboat Springs and Route County has always been ahead of the curve here. I mean, with us recently starting up the Yampa Water Fund and being able to fund our own needs of environmental and recreation needs, and to be able to sustain our agriculture economy, which is basically our 100-year-old infrastructure was falling apart because of lack of revenues and money's coming out and stuff. So, you know, there's some opportunities there to rehabilitate our water system and to be able to put it into, and again, we're dealing with this with the integrated water management supply plan and the rest. So we're working together as M&I users, municipal and industrial, the ag users, and recreational and environmental are all working together to do mutually beneficial projects that will help everybody in the whole thing.
Great. And actually, that was my last question. So you have a minute to close, Doug.
So I guess I wanted to go back to my original comment of why I'm concerned about this. My concern is that we think that we're going to pass Proposition DD, and that's going to be the end of water discussion because we'll have funded it. So that is far from the truth. The truth is that this thing comes up with $10 to $15 million a year. The water plan identifies $300 million a year. So it basically comes up with 15% of the funds that are needed to address the long-term impacts of growth, population, taking care of our current situations and the rest. So that's one of the concerns. I will tell you that one of the other concerns of my West Slope compadres is a lot of this money is going to be going to the gambling casinos, and none of them are in the West Slope. Again, you would hit on the nail on the head here earlier when we talk about the concern of dams and the rest. And so there is a concern of dams and Trans Mountain diversions, but we will have to all be diligent to make sure that we protect our water. Again, we use 10% of our water, 90% of our water goes down. So I'm a little good using a little bit more of our water in a responsible way. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Next up, we'll bring up Jason Lacey and George Krasoff. They are the only contested race this November for City Council. They're running for the 2-year at-large seat. Okay, so we'll begin with I almost said 2-minute closing. I know, we're done.
We'll go there. That'd be fun.
So we'll start a 2-minute opening, and just the order I have it, Jason, you go ahead first, and then George will follow.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Thanks for being here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Lacey. Most important thing for me, I'm a proud husband and father. My wife Dervla is home tonight with our 3 little boys. So that's without her support, I wouldn't be able to accomplish much of anything. So that's where life starts for me. I'm an attorney by trade, founding partner of Steamboat Lawyers Group here in Steamboat Springs. I've been very heavily involved in the community since I moved here a little over 12 years ago. I've been involved with everything from Planning Commission, City Planning Commission, Steamboat Springs Education Fund Board, Routt County United Way, First Impressions of Routt County, Seminars at Steamboat, and lots of other organizations that I've been proud to serve during that time here. For me, I'm just finishing up my first 4-year term, hopefully one more term on City Council. I've spent 2 years as President Pro Tem and finishing up 2 years now as President. I've really done my best to be a collaborative and inclusive leader, and I think that's been very important for the community. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished over the last 4 years. When I first ran for council 4 years ago, it was a pretty tumultuous time. During my campaign last time, the city manager was terminated. We had serious issues with our police department and serious concerns about trust in local government in general. And we've worked really hard to be to really have great outreach efforts to provide. We do council, coffee with council, we do farmers market, we do articles in the Steamboat Pilot, Valley Voice, radio show. We've done everything we can to do outreach. We've completed the downtown improvements plan. We've completed the combined law enforcement facility with Routt County, which was a great partnership. And after over 20 years of community planning efforts and one failed annexation, the West Steamboat Neighborhoods annexation occurred. And that's the end of my time.
Thank you. George.
Okay, my wife and I arrived here in Steamboat Springs in 1996. I have a son, Ben, and a daughter, Madeline, with 4 of my 6 grandchildren still living in this valley, either here in Steamboat or in Hayden. You may have seen me around town with my 4-year-old granddaughter. She's now 4. I've had her for the last few years. You see us at the pool and on the bus around town. I've been the director for Steamboat Springs Transit I ran the airport here, Bob Adams Airport. I served as the transportation commissioner for Northwest Colorado, and my consulting clients have included Steamboat, Aspen, the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority, and many others around the state. I'm running for council because I want to represent my community, my neighbors, and my friends. We have some concerns about the way things are going. I think you may agree. Great as we are as a community, we've got some problems. Look at Lincoln Avenue, it's more packed every summer, while we add homes and businesses to both sides of the bottleneck. Widening Lincoln Avenue to Elk River Road to 4-lane profile could help, but we don't have a plan for that yet. It's not proceeding through the funding process for the state. We need to get going. We need to admit the other solutions we have for traffic in our plans are not appropriate. There are plans to join 13th Street to Yampa Avenue and or to House and Parkway. Those are terrible ideas. We have a 2011 water plan that identifies 14,000 feet at the outside of water supply. That could supply a community of 56,000. We're growing, we're doubling every 20 years right now. We will hit that limit in 40 years. We have some serious problems to confront. Does it sound crazy? There were only 75,000 people, or 7,500 people here when I moved here.
Thank you, George. We're having a little, are you guys hearing a little feedback?
Am I too loud?
I'm wondering if we turned off, sorry about this.
Sure.
George, I wonder, are they with you? I don't know.
Yeah. Let's give Jason.
Yeah, let's just give it a try there. Okay. So let's start, and George will do, this first question you can answer first.
Okay.
So when City Manager Gary Suter presented the 2020 budget to council, he stated, "We have a highly dependent sales tax budget, and that translates into risk." Should we be concerned about that sales tax dependency and risk? And if so, what would you plan to do to change that dependence and diversify the city's revenue streams?
Okay, sales tax is a risk. We're highly dependent on it. It was in 1978, the city abandoned any property tax and went strictly to sales tax, and we've lived on that now for over 40 years. I know that there are aspects of it that are regressive. I think we can rebate to seniors. We already do rebate sales taxes to seniors. We can extend that program to others. But I think we're a strongly sales tax dependent community, and we need to maintain that. Property taxes are a possible addition to our funding spectrum, but I want a long-term plan. I don't want to do it piecemeal, funding this department, that department, every year with a property tax. I want to know how much property tax we're going to have.
Thank you. Jason.
So yeah, city staff has been showing us projections over the past few years that show we could be having a serious crisis with sales tax being our main revenue source in the very near future. The reason that, one of the reasons that I think that we need to look at other revenue sources is because, and you're actually seeing that with our fire question, which you're going to hear about next. When the sales tax change was made back in the late 70s, it made a lot of sense because visitors at that point were paying for 60 to 70% of the sales tax at that time. Now that script has flipped, and we're really seeing more locals are really accounting for more like 60 to 70% of those sales tax numbers now, depending on who you ask. That's not sustainable, and we need to find a way to have other second homeowners and people like that to help pay for some of our needs. That's why things like, I think the fire question we have on the ballot is an important thing for us to do.
Great. Okay, Jason, the next question. In the most recent Steamboat Springs Community Survey, which I think was 2017,
That's right.
77% of respondents rated the availability of affordable quality housing in Steamboat as poor. 59% rated the availability of affordable quality childcare and preschool as poor, and 53% rated cost of living in Steamboat as poor. Do you feel city government should play a role in making Steamboat a more affordable place to live? And if so, how?
I do, and I think you identified really the main cost challenges that we have here are the big three: are housing, childcare, and healthcare. Those are the big issues of cost that drive the high cost of living here. And I've been supportive of, for instance, the property tax levy that the Housing Authority imposed a few years ago. The voters approved that. That's something that I think is very important. We need to have more funding for low-income housing such as that. The city already provides community support for childcare needs. We provide funding to First Impressions for scholarship money for low-income families. We need to continue that, and it would be great if we could expand that as well. We always have a member of City Council on the First Impressions Board of Routt County, so they can lobby the state to get more funding to help us with that too. And I'd like us to look at some other unique options that other communities like Summit County has done with the Peak Health Alliance to see if there are ways we can help lower our health insurance costs as well, because I think those are the big three issues.
Thank you. George, same question to you.
Well, I think affordable housing is critical in this community at this state because we're reaching a point where the east coast of the United States, Florida, are becoming out migration zones. People are leaving those areas and there's millions of people. The richest among them can choose to come here. And they're beginning to compete with the locals for all housing stock. It's not, I'm sorry? Okay. I'm sorry. People are competing for all housing stock now. It's not just condominiums at the base. We'll put up homes, we'll build homes in the annexed area, but I tell you, they will go into the second home stock unless we do things to maintain their affordability for locals. Also, in terms of affordability, we have to watch where we put affordable housing. If every adult in that home needs a car to get around, that's their second greatest expense compared to housing. 3 cars in a family with an adult child is a tremendous expense. We can deal with transportation issues. Thank you.
Okay, I believe now George will answer this question. Other mountain towns have taken steps to limit nightly rentals in traditional neighborhoods with mixed results. The city of Denver took the aggressive step of allowing nightly rentals only if it's the homeowner's primary residence. Do you think nightly rentals are a problem in Steamboat? And if so, what is the solution?
I really don't know that much about nightly rentals in terms of it being a problem. I do know that accessory dwelling units, the secondary homes that people are building on their lots, represent a tremendous amount of growth potential in this community. We talked about 450 homes in the annexation, but really, if we just look at infill potential, we could have another 5,000 accessory dwelling units in this town, 5 times what we have in the annexation. When I look at the occupancies of some of these homes, I have a place next to me that has an accessory dwelling unit. Last year, it had 4 adults in the accessory dwelling unit, 6 adults in the main unit. We can have a tremendous amount of density in town that we're not planning for if we're not monitoring the use of these units. I hope that's responsive.
Thank you. Jason.
So City Council identified this as a concern, and we impaneled a committee, a vacation rental committee, to start looking at these issues. For me, I'm not a person who likes to make policy changes until I have better data. So right now we have very limited licensing requirements on our short-term rentals in the community. So we're changing that. We are going to require all forms basically of short-term rentals to be licensed now. That's going to change within the next year. And that's going to give us better data to know where these short-term rentals exist, how often they use them. Are they just occasional use? Are they full-time use somewhere in the middle? And we'll also know where they're located. So that's, once we get that information, that's really going to help us have a better idea of what we might need to be able to do. And some other communities have done some interesting things. Some communities have limited these rentals in certain neighborhoods, community neighborhoods. They've added short-term rental taxes to pay for affordable housing. And once we get the data, I'm willing to look at any and all of those issues.
Great. So Jason,
Yes.
In a small community, am I starting, are you?
I think it's my turn.
It is your turn.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it's getting a little fuzzy. So in a small community, conflicts of interest can arise. So based on your profession, background, your involvement in various organizations, what types of decisions do you anticipate having to step down from?
Yeah, this issue comes up for me occasionally. Being an attorney, I do have relationships with clients, with business interests, and with real estate matters and things of that nature. And I'm very, I take my word very seriously, and my ethics and my integrity. So if there's ever even a whiff of a conflict of an interest, I step down. It's something that the community deserves. They deserve that transparency. They don't need to have anybody on any issue sitting in when they could have some conflict of interest, which would cloud their judgment or even have a perception that it might cloud their judgment. I don't think that's appropriate. And when it comes up, I'll definitely step down. For me, I think it's a very rare occasion when it does, but definitely when it happens, I will step down.
Thank you. George, same question for you.
I am fortunate in that I don't have many conflicts of interest at this time. I can really dedicate my full attention to the council position. I'm a strong believer in the code of ethics that's adopted by the city. I also am a strong believer in the sunshine laws that are here in Colorado. I've been disappointed at times. I don't think that the community has done as good a job as they should have, and I can commit to being an ethical, transparent representative for my community.
Thank you. I'm tempted to, can I throw one more question out? Okay, because it's a fun one that someone sent in. So George, you can start. If the city received a $10 million grant to use in any way they wanted, how would you spend that money?
10 million?
10 million.
Well, we're gonna need more than that for our transportation problems, so let's do affordable housing.
Okay, Jason?
So I would probably split that up between some affordable housing projects, hopefully in partnership with other community partners such as the county, school district, and others that might be willing to join us. I'd also like to find a way to help improve our parking. I think that will be, as growth occurs and more visitors arrive, I think we need to look at that as well. And I think we have some transportation projects that we are actually planning to fund. We keep getting monies from developers when projects are approved. We are working with CDOT on getting grants to help us with those. And I think that we could both fund some road projects and also expand our transit program, especially to help those low-income people that rely on it.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're down to 1 minute closing statements. So George, you get to start and Jason will close.
Well, thank you again for the forum. I hope every one of you is going to vote for me. Please do. It's really an honor to be here and to speak to you. I have a website, krozoff.com. You know, when we're talking in 1 minute, it's pretty hard to get everything in. Please visit my website, make a donation. I cannot run without local support. I'm not doing this by myself. So please support me. And then in terms of, you know, one of the things I heard from the school board was, let's be data driven. That's what I would like to do. I'm a mathematician by trade. I'd like to look at our problems in terms of as a mathematician and plan for the future on a solid basis. Generalities are easy to agree on. We know we got to be a great community. How are we going to get there?
Thank you.
Right. So you've heard a lot about some of the important issues that matter to the community tonight, but really this discussion only scratches the surface on all the things that we decide on a weekly basis at City Council. The city is involved in so many ways in this community, in so many departments. And for me, the success of the city really depends on a lot of factors. It depends on having a strong city council. It depends on having a great city staff. It depends on having a really engaged public. and having good relationships with our community partners. And I feel like we really have that right now. And I would love to continue as your representative for 2 more years to help move Steamboat forward. I feel like my background and experience makes me uniquely qualified for this role, and I would really appreciate your support for 2 more years on November 5th.
Thank you very much. And last issue up, I would invite Kathy Canal and Louis Antonucci up to speak to us about referendum 2A.
Don't leave anybody. This is the most important.
Yeah, don't cross us.
And Joe Oakland is also here as well. Yeah, Kathy's gonna whistle really loudly when she sees you walking out the door. So just to remind you, referendum 2A asks Steamboat Springs voters to approve a 2 mil levy to support Steamboat Springs Fire Rescue and EMS. Kathy Canal and Joe Oakland will be speaking in favor of referendum 2A, and Louis Antonucci will be speaking in opposition. So we will begin with 2-minute statements, opening statements, and Louis, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Louis Antonucci. I've been a resident of Steamboat Springs for about 40 years. I have owned a couple of small businesses in my time. I've owned commercial real estate in Steamboat. And I understand from a firsthand point of view how every tax that's passed, property tax, affects small business owners. So the reason I'm here tonight speaking against it is not that I'm against emergency services, fire department, ambulance service, because as the community grows, obviously the needs of the community have grown, and I think that those things have to be funded. My opposition is to the way that it's proposed to be funded. And when I was on city council for 12 years, and I served from 1989 to 1993. So my first time around was coming out of the 80s recession. Second time around, I got elected in 2001, right after the 2000 dot-com bust. And then towards the end of my tenure was the 2008-2009 bust. So my point is that the city has certain core services, and those core services you would imagine are fire, police, emergency services, roads, snow plowing. They should be funded first. Every year, the city council is given a presentation by every department, and they can decide at that point in time how, to what level each and every department needs to be funded. And they should do a top-down priority and start with all the core services, and then fund accordingly. And if we run out of money, then go for a property tax. And I'm okay with that, but I think the property tax should go into the general fund so that the city council at whatever point in time can fund it appropriately.
Thank you. Kathy, are you doing the opening?
I would love to do the opening, and thank you, Louis, for setting me up. My name's Kathy.
We serve together, you know.
We love each other. And I will tell you, I served on city council from 1997, I think, to 2003. And I have to tell you, my experience on city council and everything subsequent tells me core services should never be a part of the general fund, because the general fund is handled by councils who are elected at that time, who have a lot of pressures put on them by other interest groups other than the core services. Core services need to be sustainable. They need to be not related to sales tax, the ups and downs of the economy. They need to always be there. And they need to not be able to be in competition with things like the latest fad, house and hail, electric bikes, whatever we want to. I love my fellow city council members, past and present, but I do know, based on who's elected, it can be very vulnerable. I have 1 minute, oh my God. Okay, please understand that this 2A is so important to us because we need to have a funding source that gets everybody to be fair. Right now, second homeowners do not pay a dime for any of our fire or EMT services. I live in Valdez-Aire. I'm surrounded by second homeowners, only one who rents. If I am getting a call that I have an emergency service, like I am having a heart attack on my property, is on fire, and the fire department has gone to 2 other places that are second homeowners who don't pay. I'm gonna be mad. We have right now, we have 2 times a week, we have third out calls that we cannot handle. We have 800 calls this last year, there were second calls. And I'm gonna let Joe here real quick, take 1 second.
Well, can you just, will you just at least let people know who you are, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Two minutes. Okay.
I'm Joe Oakland. I've worked for the city as a firefighter. I'm not here representing the city. Currently, I'm representing myself. And just so you know who I am, I'm born and raised in Steamboat for 35 years, and I've been around emergency services that entire time because my dad was involved with all of that. So I've watched it my entire life, and I'm here to help push in the right direction on this 2A stuff.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's important that you guys know who's answering questions. So we'll start with a question for Kathy and Joe. Referendum 2A would fund additional staff for Steamboat Springs Fire and Rescue EMS over the next few years. We're a relatively small community with not, hundreds of calls a day. So why does the city need more firefighters?
We'll let Joe have that one.
So the city needs more firefighters because we have been short-staffed substantially over the last several years. Since 2014, the fire chief has been presenting information to city council showing them how not only are we currently behind, but how we continue to get further behind. And city council has consistently identified that they don't have any money to spend on additional firefighters. So that's been over 5 years over multiple councils. They continue to struggle with that. A big piece of that and how much call volume we've had increased. This year, we predict that there'll be 2,500 calls that the fire department will respond to. That's fire and EMS calls. 60% of those are EMS calls and 40% of those are fire. So it's a pretty large percentage actually that is fire type calls. And the big number on that is that since 2010, which was the last time we got 1 firefighter on each shift, we've had a 42% increase in our call volume, which is substantial in 9 years. And it has no signs of slowing down. We're off to the races.
Thank you. This question, Louis, is for you, and you did talk about it in your opening statement, but maybe be more specific. What are you basing your opposition to referendum 2A on? What are your key points?
I think the key point is more philosophical about how the city is run. And every year the staff gets a chance to put a budget together based on the input from each department head. And it's presented to the city council, and the city council at that point in time gets to prioritize. And I mean, there's a couple of things. One, I sat up 12 different years, I sat putting a budget together. And I don't care whether it's the city of Steamboat Springs or the United States of America, there's no such thing as enough money in the coffers. And every department always has more needs than what there is money. So it's up to the council to prioritize. And I think that core services should come first. And then if we get to the point that the community has more needs than the funding that we have, then go for a tax, but go for a tax that goes into the coffers that can be spent the way that whatever the city council feels is appropriate based on the needs of the community.
Thank you. No. Sorry.
It's too long.
Maybe you can combine it somehow.
She will.
Okay, so back to you all. A 2 mil levy will not generate enough revenue to meet all the needs of Steamboat Springs Fire Rescue and EMS. Why isn't the city seeking a higher mill levy?
I would love to say that, to talk about that. We have to walk before we can run. I was the chairman of the advisory committee made up of the community, many commercial people. As you know, because of the Gallagher Amendment, commercial gets hit much harder than we do on the residential level. And we unanimously agreed that 2 mil would be something that that everybody would agree to. And I do think we have to walk before we can run. And this is a way that we can get 3 more fighters in 2020 and 3 more in 2021, and it allows us to really start to save for another needed fire station. And I want to emphasize the walk before we run. We have a lot bigger need, but we have to bring the community with us. And there is nothing more important than the public safety for all of us. And that's why it should not be at the whims of city council. It should be it should be a funding source that is there and dedicated towards fire and EMS.
Thank you. Okay, Louis, a Citizens Advisory Committee that Kathy served on, studied, and Louis, you did not serve on it. A Citizens Advisory Committee studied the needs of the Steamboat Springs Fire Rescue and EMS, and recommended that the city pursue the 2 mil property tax to support additional staff and allow the city to begin saving for a new downtown fire station. Do you disagree with that committee's recommendation, and why?
It's always hard to disagree when the city council puts a citizens committee together. But knowing some of those people, I think that some of those people compromised and basically went along with the status quo. And I think that it probably, and I think in a lot of the people's hearts that were on there, on the committee, that they didn't feel that it was the best way to go. I obviously disagree with Kathy on this. That I think that the city council, we elect people to represent us. We elect people to pretty much do the right thing with the budget. And if we're saying we're gonna have a dedicated property tax to fire and emergency services, but what about the police department? What about roads and snow plowing and water and sewer? Core services are core services, and I think if we elect the right people, they will put the money where it belongs, and then the things that can't get funded, and then because we're a growing community, and we are a growing community, if we need a property tax, get the property tax, put it in the general fund and spend it appropriately.
If we elect the right team.
Okay, so for the pro side, what assurances do we have that the money generated by the 2 mil levy will actually be used for fire and rescue and EMS?
This will be, go ahead.
You got it.
So it's right in the ballot language, first of all, that the 2 mils is earmarked only for fire and EMS services and can't be spent on anything else. And there's talk of the fact that, they'll cut the other sales tax dollars that they put towards that. The 2 mils is never going to cover the full cost of providing fire and EMS service inside the city. We currently spend about $4 million a year, and 2 mils generates $1.5 million. So they're going to have to continue to supplement all of that with sales tax. And all of the city council members have stated clearly that they have no interest, and there's no projections, and there's no direction that anybody's ever looked at of cutting money that they're already spending from the sales tax dollars. This is an increase of money that goes to the fire department, and they specifically earmarked it for that because in the past, anytime that anybody's talked about a property tax, they said, well, where are you going to spend the money, and why don't you cut it from someplace else? We want it earmarked for something very specific to know exactly what we're going to spend the money on. Don't just let it go into the general fund.
Thank you. Louis, I know you're here because you don't support 2A, but you also seem to recognize the needs of fire rescue and EMS. So acknowledging that, how would you suggest the city adequately fund this department and plan for its growth as our community grows?
I think I already answered that. Government is difficult because with a growing community, there are always more needs than there is money.
If you've already answered that, what would you cut then to provide for a growing?
You can't ask that of a person that's not on city council. Listen, they are given a packet that is so big and they do so much studying that without being there, it would be, listen, I was there for 12 years. You cannot second guess what these people go through. And my hats are off to every one of them because it is always brain damage. There was no question about it. That's one thing that Kathy and I really can't agree on. And when I got elected in 2001, she was my city council president, and we almost always saw things through the same lens. But in this case, it's a core service. Why are we separating one core service and not the other ones? That's my point.
Okay, thank you. So this
Counterpoint.
So this is for both of you. And so we'll let you guys answer it first. So if 2A is approved, it would become the city's first property tax in 4 decades. The city is currently dependent on sales tax revenue, which we've already talked about. Do you see this referendum as the first step to moving the city toward pursuing more property taxes to support services? And if so, do you view that as a positive or a negative?
I would be happy to answer that. I don't necessarily see this as a first step. I see this as a necessary step that I started back in 1997 saying, for our core services, they need not to be dependent upon the ups and downs of sales tax. For the core services that the city provides, we need to have a sustainable amount of money. We have something that's not dependent upon the whims of whatever city council that we happen to elect that is there. I do think there is opportunity for us to look at more expanding, like the word emergency services or public safety, that goes into the police. That's to be determined in the future.
Louis?
Could you repeat like just the last section of that?
Yeah, so do you see this there are people in the community.
No, just the last sentence.
Okay.
No, actually, you don't have to. Because the last sentence was, do you think it will lead to further tax increases?
Yes.
Does anybody think that it won't? I mean, they already said they need 9 mils and we're starting with 2. So here's the thing. Sales tax revenues are up almost 8% this year. Last year, they were up 4%. The year before, they were up 6.5%. The year before that, they were up 6.2%. Okay? Inflation is about 2%. We're really getting more money every year. Now, the fact is that, this is a great community. Everybody's involved in the community. They come to city council. Everybody wants things. The city council tries to please everybody. The reality is, fund your core services, and then fund everything else. We don't need a property tax.
Okay. So last question. Lily, we'll start with you. This is from the Economic Development Committee Chamber. I don't mind saying that. How will this ballot issue impact our business owners, and why should they support or oppose this measure? As a business owner, I think you could answer that.
Well, there's a lot of people here that own small businesses. I own the Old Town Pub for 18 years. Started in '84 during a recession, ended it in about 2000. I owned a t-shirt shop for about 3 months, couldn't stand that, so I got out of it. But the reality is that small businesses have a hard time in Steamboat because of the cyclical nature of the economy, and then also the seasonal nature of the business, of the resort industry. And I think everything that happens, every tax gets passed on to the tenant. And if you own the building, like I was fortunate enough, I owned the building and I ran the business. Where's the money going to come from? You can only charge so much for a hamburger or a t-shirt. So I think that every tax hurts the local people in this town. And I think there's got to be a balance, which is why I think core services first and everything else. And if you can't fund it, then you don't fund it.
What is your take on how this will impact small businesses?
Well, I think the issue for small businesses is the Gallagher Amendment, and I think we need to deal with the Gallagher Amendment. I think that having core services being funded in a sustainable way, if I owned a small business and I had a fire or I had an emergency, I don't want to be that 3rd or 4th out call. And what we're missing here is that we have a problem not getting to our people when 2 times a week, we have 3rd out calls that we cannot answer. 800 times this year, we've had 2nd out calls, and depending upon where we are, we can't answer all of those. So I think core safety and all of our services need to be answered. I think it's a very small insurance policy that we do to be able to pay for making sure we have enough people to answer our basic needs.
Perfect. We're down to the closing statements. So you guys here, Joe and Kathy, you'll start since Louis started. So who is doing the closing?
I just want to tell you, if I'm the third or fourth alcohol and I die because you all didn't give me and you were a second homeowner, I'm gonna hop. We need to recognize that we need to get our second homeowners paid. Is it fair? It's important that everybody pays for these services. Also, I own a home that is has a market value about 950, an actual value about 687, an assessed value at 47.5. That is a scotch a month. I'm broadening my horizons this way so I can lose a scotch a month to have insurance fee, for me to have the proper, emergency and fire care that I need and deserve as a citizen in Steamboat Springs.
And I never said don't fund it. I woke up in the middle of the night last night. Was that flying around my bed? Anyway, I never said don't fund it. Listen, my hats are off to the fire department, to the ambulance people. I mean, the worst day of your life is when you have to dial 911. And when these guys show up, honestly, there was no amount of money that you probably wouldn't spend to have them be there. So don't take this as that I'm not for emergency services or even increasing the level of the service that we provide. To me, it's a question of how it gets funded.
So aren't we the best for last?
Yes, this is a great way to end the night, and we are ending the night. So thank you all for being here. And real quickly, I want to do a public service announcement. Ballots will be mailed out Friday, so look for them, and we hope that you will be voting. And then real quickly, I want to thank the Routt County Democrats, Routt County Republicans, Steamboat Springs Economic Development Council, and in particular, Steamboat Board of Realtors. They provided all the free appetizers. Thank you.
Good job.
So he was on the ambulance, which was, he was on the ambulance. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.